Good evening and welcome everyone to the webinar hosted jointly by Almas and National Stock Exchange. My name is Maulik Shah, the co-founder and a CEO of Almas Risk Consulting. Wishing everyone, all your, all your team members, a safe and healthy times. It's indeed a pleasure to welcome all of you. And I know most of you have been working from home and or working for home. And thank you so much for taking your time out to be present on this seminar, this webinar today. Almas has always been at the forefront of providing thought leadership in the area of risk management, and in particular, the financial risk management, namely foreign exchange, commodities, and interest rates. As recent as in November, we had an annual conference that talked about bringing the offshore market to the onshore market. And since then, in the last few months, we have seen a number of circulars RBI came out with towards making the local market, the onshore market, more vibrant. This webinar series is designed to provide the similar thought process, thought leadership, by bringing experts, academicians, and market practitioners and get their perspective on the market. The goal is to act as one of the pillars to drive change and progress in the financial sector. In the webinar series today, Managing FX and Liquidity Risk in Global Crisis, we plan to discuss the subject in these times of pandemic and how do we move forward successfully. And we have with us the experts from the varied field. Let me now take this opportunity to introduce all the three speakers and thank you all for consenting to be on today's panel. We have with us a very renowned, a very self-known, renowned and highly respected treasury professional, Mr. Tyagarajan. He is known in the market as Tyaguji or Tyagu, and he is the Senior Vice President, Forex Treasury at Reliance Industry. Then we have Ms. Huzan Mistry, a highly successful investment banker turned exchange product development head at National Stock Exchange, and an accomplished woman corporate treasurer, and someone who has experienced in handling the entire gamut of financial risk, be it currency or commodity, including the liquidity and the interest rate risk. So I welcome all three of you to this today's webinar series on managing FX and the liquidity risk in global crisis. So now let me begin by having Tyaguji as the first panel member. Tyaguji, welcome to the webinar. Let me place some data here and then leave it to you to build on it and guide the participants what to look forward to. We are talking about a pandemic and the response by all the government, all the central bankers through a huge fiscal stimulus. In fact, 10% of GDP is the new normal. And if that was not enough, even a country like us, we are boasting very proudly to say that we are also at 10% league now. The next piece, which is the race to the bottom, the negative interest rates. We have been having a euro interest rates negative, and now even we are talking about US interest rates at negative. Oil settlement at negative $40, $50. Unusual, unheard of. Coming to India, the home country, we have seen the huge liquidity, almost 7 to 8 lakh crores, and at the same time, corporates not having any access to the liquidity. The increased unemployment rates, the retail stress. How do you really make a meaning out of all of it? And I know this is unprecedented. We haven't seen any previous cases of similar global lockdown. But at the same time, if you have to look forward, which are the key things, key indicators, the key recovery? How do you see the recovery spanning out? And what will be really a barometers to look at? What's really the good start? Would like to hear from you, your perspective on the entire thing. Tyaguji, over to you. Tyaguji, you're on a mute. If you can unmute and speak. Tyaguji, you're on a mute.
Yeah.
Yes. Now we can hear you very clearly.
Yeah, thanks, Maulik. Good evening, everybody. It's indeed a pleasure and privilege for me to be once again in this forum. Actually, taking on from what you asked me to forecast, forecasting has always been a treacherous job. And that too, in exceptionally unprecedented times that we are living in, the forecasting is going to be more difficult than ever before. So, if you put three dominant issues right now on our hand, there can be one is the gravity of the pandemic. Number two, the severity of the global economic contraction. Number three, the intensity of the monetary and fiscal stimulus by the governments as well as the central banks. So these are all the three dominant inputs into any decision making exercise that you are going to do. Number one, pandemic. We are well aware of the pandemic, and possibly in the last 2 months, we have learned to live with this pandemic. We are not sure whether we would ever leave this pandemic, whether the pandemic will ever leave us. That's a basic point. So, number two, economic. Economic contraction, the intensity of the slowdown that is happening in front of us. Everyone is impacted. There is no doubt about it. See, in any downtick in the business cycle, we can normally classify those downticks as either a downturn or a recession or a depression. If your driver loses a job, then it is downturn. If your neighbor loses a job, that is recession. If you lose your job, it is depression. I don't know what kind of impact that you have had because of the current slowdown in the economy, but everyone is impacted for that matter. See, basically, what happens in what is the big difference between socialism and capitalism? Socialism naturally it never involves any business cycle, whereas capitalism thrives on business cycles. Now, all these business cycles naturally it has its ups and downs. 50% of the normally a economic shock happens when 50% of the sector gets impacted to the extent of 100%, or 100% of the sector gets impacted to the extent of 50%. These are all the normal economic shocks that we are used to it. Now, right now, what we are undergoing is 100% of the sectors getting impacted 100%. So there is no one left in the street who has not been left untouched by this pandemic. And so basically, we now understand that the slowdown is going to be a severe, protracted slowdown is going to be with us for some time. So we are going to have the pandemic. We are going to have the pandemic. We are going to have the slowdown. And what is the solution for it? Basically the monetary and fiscal stimulus that have been put on by the central banks and the governments possibly give rise to a hope that there can be a recovery. But for those stimulus, naturally, there is no hope for recovery. So when the recovery will start? That's a basic question. The recovery will start when the lockdowns ease. Actually, I can put it as three conditionalities for recovery to start. One is the lockdown should ease. Number two, the confidence should return. Number three, the pandemic has to moderate. These are all the three very tough conditions to comply with as of now. But these are all the essential conditionalities for any recovery to be on a strong footing. So just because of the possibility of all the three happening together in the next few months is very low, we can very well conclude the severity of the contraction is going to stay with us for much longer than you expect. Now, coming back to the recovery, the shape of the recovery and speed of the recovery matters. Shape of the recovery, now of course every alphabet is being talked about as a shape of the recovery. Let it be a U shape, V shape, L shape, and W. And of course, there are the whoosh signs, the there are a lot of shapes also being talked. But right now, if you see this slide, the predominantly a large number of people expecting a U-shaped recovery to happen. A U-shaped recovery means a lot of pain. V-shaped recovery, there is less pain. 2008-9, it is a V-shaped recovery. So rest of the shapes we will just leave it. So basically, what we have to see is whether U-shaped or V-shaped recovery that is going to happen. Whichever shaped recovery that happens, what are all the common conditionalities? Number one, don't expect the recovery to be fast and swift. The recovery is going to be taking a long time, actually. Basically, because some major portion of the real economic activity has been lost forever. Now, can you think of travel? Can you think of tourism? It has all been lost forever, actually. Possibly for another 2 years, could be. And then probability of stop-start economies. You just see what has happened to the Germany in the recent, the last 2 days. Basically, you start the economy and then you have the fear of second wave of infections and you stop the economy. So this stop-start economy, what happens to it? The confidence level gets reduced. Number three, there is absolutely no silver bullet solution for the entire problem. There have been countries which have had no lockdown, a hard lockdown, or a soft lockdown. Actually, no lockdown, Sweden for that matter. Hard lockdown, France. No lockdown, rather soft lockdown, Germany. Hard lockdown, France. All these countries, you just see output has been deteriorating. That is, all the PMIs are lower, whether you lock down the economy or you did not lock down the economy. So to that extent, there is no silver bullet solution. The only playbook that you have is the China's experience in the last month. After 2 months of lockdown, China opened up, and then 2 months retail sales had fallen by 20.5% year on year in Jan and Feb. Now, right now in March, you had a retail sales falling by 15.8%. So to that extent, what it does suggest, what Chinese experience suggests, that there is not going to be a revengeful spending wave that is going to come. Possibly, the consumer is going to take it much easier as the lockdowns ease and the economies open up. The biggest problem is the second order impact. The second order impact on account of forget about actually nowadays the markets are not talking about the number of cases, number of infections, number of deaths. Nobody is talking about it. The only thing is the second order impact. What is the kind of unemployment that you see, where unemployment is going to peak out. Structural growth trajectory is going to be lower by at least 1% for the developed economies, at least by 2% for the EM economies over the period of next possibly 3 to 5 years. Then what is going to happen? Actually, as we enter the crisis, the corporate leverages as well as household leverages were higher. So the debt burden on the corporates, especially the non-financial corporate sector, was very high. And now this non-financial corporate sector sees their earnings shrink, their revenues shrink, whereas the debt burden continues to stay. So naturally, you are going to see corporate delinquencies and defaults. So delinquencies, defaults, deleveraging, this is going to be the name of the game in the next 3 months. So all put together, what we are going to see, the 3 points that I started talking with, that is the pandemic, it is going to stay for some more time. That uncertainty is going to be there. Number two, the economic contraction is going to get more worse than before it gets better. And three, the V-shaped recovery or U-shaped recovery, it is not going to happen in scale and speed. Over to Molly.
Thank you so much, Tyaguji. And I will come back to you with the further impact on the market and especially the forex view. But before that, let me take on from what you have talked about as an impact on the economy and move on to the person who's actually handled it over last few months. Sapna, your industry has been one of the worst hit industry, and there has been a major liquidity crisis. Even the I'm sure a lot of companies would have faced order cancellations. Let me get back to the ground realities. In the last few months, how did you handle? And I'm sure as a company, and I'm now coming specifically to the point on forex booking, managing the liquidity, forward contract cancellations, executions of all of that. Tell me your experience and what has been your key things that allowed you to handle this over last few months. Share your experience, Sapna.
Thanks, Malik. Hello, everybody. So we went into the lockdown for Maharashtra on around the 20th of March. National lockdown 22nd or 24th of March. We actually started working out of home before that, which is 17th of March. Before the national lockdown happened, as in even after Maharashtra came into, what we found is there have been broadly three issues. One is the liquidity. So normally we deal electronically. So all our dealing is via either the bank's platform or Reuters FXall or CCIL. And what as a practice we do is that everything is electronic. The banks that do not have electronic platforms, we onboarded on them on or they were onboarded us on CCIL. What we found was once the lockdown happened, most of the banks have disconnected the online pricing. So trying to get to banks and get pricing and knowing where the market is a big problem. So we've handled it in two ways. One is the CCI systems have been open, so you can deal electronically there, and you have a composite price. So you transact on the price, and it goes to the bank you want to. Uh, and the other thing that we've gone and done to the banks is we've requested, and some of the banks have obliged, at least for our trade flows, open up the systems for 1 million or 2 million so that I can cover and I don't have to call, and constantly wait for the price. So the learning for me from that is once we get back to office, get all banks onto CCR, irrespective whether they have their electronic platforms or not. It's just good to have a backup. The second thing is when we went into on the national lockdown, and we did, I suppose RBI also would have seen the liquidity issues that everybody was facing. The timings got shortened, so 10 to 2 markets. Now, the problem with the 10 to 2 market is the branches on your flows, the branch processes it comes to you at around 12 o'clock or 12:30. You've got to quickly cover up the transaction and report back to the branch. You don't get the time to think. Okay, so what has helped us there is you having a proper communication, proper operating practice where we know beforehand this is in the pipeline, it is going to come. And also, what has been very, very beneficial is us being able to operate on the currency futures. So the exchanges have actually been dealing 9 to 5 when the OTC market is 10 to 2. So that's been really helpful. So I wouldn't think, and additionally, what we've always had is we've had accounts with multiple brokers or multiple counterparties, so that if one system goes down, I'm not left hostage. I can actually cover my transaction or my hedge my position on the system rather than wait only in the OTC market. So I think to everybody who's not on the futures market, one has to, because it even if you don't transact, it literally tells you where the price is. And then coming to the main thing is on the positions. So we are a professional centralized treasury, and the key learning here is that there is always risk. So wherever, at any point in time, there is risk. Whatever you do, there is risk. So the main thing is to be able to manage the risk. And I think even for the organization as a whole, the realization that you have to dedicate a resource who are professional enough to manage it, to be able to know where to look for the price, to be able to see spreads, to be able to know where what should be the forward points, etc., etc. It's not just a finance role that can be done by anybody, right? Now, just if you look at your screen, and I put this up to see how rupee traded, and if you look at October 18, the high was at 74.50. Okay, that's October 2018. Coming into the year, which is say mid-July 2019, the low we saw after that was 68.30. This is, I mean, for all those who are in the markets you'd know, there everybody was like, any uptick you've got to sell. There are huge flows coming in. These are different times. We are not going to go back. We are not going to weaken. Kaise hoga, nahi hoga. Now, if you see from mid July, which was 68.30, and then you go to September 19, which we went to a high of 72.40. So from September 19 right up to Feb, we have been broadly in a range of 72 to 72 range. We are exporters, so I am an exporter. We have a good risk management policy. We tend to do hedging on a 12-month rolling basis. So any upticks, of course, this is a spot price. Generally, 6 months premium, it has been about 1 rupee 50 paisa, say 25 paisa a month. If I look from September right up to February, and I'm talking about at that point in time, if I was hedging my exposure for May 2020. I'm adding, so September 19, I would have got a rate of about 74.80 because 72.40 plus the premium. Around November, December, I mean, all these dates, I would have got about an average for May up to February, say, I would have got an average of about between 73 rupees forward rate. Okay. Now coming to the point when, okay, now you're looking at the pink color is the range that happened from September up to Jan, where everyone was looking to sell. Exporters were looking to sell around 72, and importers, I suppose, you were looking to buy around close to 70 or below 70. And then the gray area is the previous high. So even once we broke above 72.50, which is around the I think the last week of Feb, we are looking at, okay, the next resistance is 74.50. Arey boss, that is so damn good, because on an average, if you've got forward rate of 73.5, this is spot going to 74.5. But at that point in time, we were already seeing noises about, I mean, the Italy lockdown and around Europe things happening. So as a strategy, what we decided is, of course, I would go and sell some amount of forwards, because I'm getting 74.5 plus the premium, which is now we're talking Feb end. I'm getting at least another 50, 60 paisa for more than that, because March end was, it's about $1 for May end. So we're talking 75.5. The moment we broke 74.5, where we're in uncharted territories, we decided to go with options. So we actually said, let's do a combination, because now we really don't know where we're going. So we did some amount of option structures where you can be zero cost, but as we speak today, I am actually getting the call leg is getting exercised against me. So where I was happy with getting a 75 buy 75 put, sell 76 say 40 call, like, okay, if it goes to 76.40, great. Those numbers are getting exercised against me, right? Now the issue that has happened is come last week of March, and if you see the long green candle when we broke above 74.50, all that has happened within 10 days, where it moved 2.5 rupees within 10 days, and after that, this is a weekly chart, so we are at 75.5. The issue is that coming, as we saw at the end of March itself, we were seeing lots of orders getting cancelled or postponed. And we were also seeing, because the branches were closed, documents not being processed, we're not getting the flow in. I mean, the sum total of it is that we've got to cancel the contracts or we've got to extend the contracts. And I didn't have to wait for my marketing to tell me because we're a dedicated treasury, I can see the flows, I can see the numbers just trickling in, when normally if it's 100 a day and I'm seeing probably 30 a day or 20 a day, and I can see something's not quite right, and we are seeing the effect. And the issue that so because you don't have to wait for somebody, because the dedicated treasury, you just start going and doing damage control, because you just need to take the action, otherwise it's just too late. Today, if you're sitting today, we're at if you didn't cut it then or didn't cut it now, you probably will cut it around 77 rupees when we reach there. Cut the hedge, I mean.
So I think
And
points, Sapna, that you mentioned, if I have to just pick a couple of very, very important things. One is the very important relevance of having a professional treasury setup, which you have, and that allows you to independently decide when to act, when not to act within the policy guideline. And few other points which are related with the electronic platform being available, CCIL and the exchange as an alternate way. Any other key things that you would want to highlight?
Yeah, so I cannot emphasize enough having a dedicated treasury so that everybody else can sleep peacefully and do whatever they need to do. And even to the point, where it is sometimes thought about that, okay, you can do every month in certain tranches and you'll be okay on an average. This is not stock market SIP, because at the end of the day, there is a maturity of the contract. And, I mean, so what if you beat the Sensex or the thing? At the end of the day, you still have to bear the cash flow loss, right?
So you're just not managing the market, but you are also managing the management.
Absolutely. Because I think sometimes you go to the doctor also to feel that hold your hand and feel better. Whatever medicine he may give you, it's just the comfort. The management everybody can sleep peacefully because they know someone's taking care of it. It is so happens sometimes that the what is the cash flow impact here is forgotten, and then suddenly you say, boss, there is things coming here as well. Think about it. It's forgotten about. So yes.
So Sapna, I want to come back to you with one more question, but before that, let me pick up the one that you mentioned about the exchange relevance and go to Hussain. Hussain, you have been in the National Stock Exchange. In fact, let me just take a step back, because you have been an investment banker, been part of the entire financial market development over last more than 12 years. In fact, you have been key instrumental in introducing options, IRF products, and you have seen all of it and you have contributed. Recently, we have seen RBI came up with this circular to open up the onshore market, making it much more easier, inviting more and more participants. And at the same time, as Sapna talked about, the exchange has a very key role, and especially in the current market where it is the banks are open between 10 to 2, we have seen exchange providing that liquidity for hedging. So all of it, what are your thoughts in terms of the financial market developments and how important it is the June development, that is April circular, which is opening up the market, and we will see that from 1st of June. Your thoughts on that, Hussain?
Thanks so much, Maulik, and I'd like to thank everyone else as part of NSE for agreeing to be part of this call. Sapna, special thanks to you. It is very gratifying to hear from a user that something that we've all worked very hard to bring liquidity to is genuinely working as a very complementary market to the OTC and the bank market. Coming to your question, Maulik, on the April 2020 circular from RBI, I think it is certainly a step in the right direction. Many such steps have been taken. We are in an unprecedented, redefined scale at global uncertainty. I think this is a big shift in regulator thinking to imagine domestic banks being allowed to participate in NDF markets. I think when we saw currency derivative markets come across on the exchange platform, I think it brought a new level of players, participants, a new level of vibrancy to what happened to domestic FX markets. I think linking the NDF market into effectively through the pipeline of the domestic banks will bring additional perhaps flexibility and ability for banks to perhaps provide better services to their clients. I think there are additional benefits from that circular. There is reduction in documentation, though if you ask me hand on my heart, I would want it to be even further liberalized. Whether exchange or onshore OTC banks, I think there is a large amount of reduction in the operational documentation parts, but I think we still have some way to go. But I think, as I mentioned earlier, I think it's a step in the right direction. I think, again, coming back to this interlinking of onshore exchanges, offshore exchanges, NDF markets, all put together will only add to more vibrancy and perhaps better pricing for users at large, because it gives price makers more avenues to hedge their risk. It gives them better liquidity pools to manage risk. And I think I'll later come to some of the slides I've shared with you in terms of demonstrating what we're seeing on the exchange platform. I'm happy to take it now if you want, or we can take it up later.
I will put it up right away, and you can take it up that.
So very briefly, what I want to mention is So very briefly, what I want to go through is, I think, as Sapna also mentioned, we have the exchange open from 9 to 5. We have the bank and the OTC market open from 10 to 2. We've had various discussions and debates with regulators, market participants, etc., on the ability of a futures market to sustain itself and be stable even when the underlying spot was closed. What I've put up in the graph, to just make it very simple, is the yellow parts. If the orange sections are the time zones when exchange is open, the banks are closed. Honestly, I think one can easily say, and this is, I've taken intraday data, so I've timed it through the day for about, from I think it's the 4th to the 12th. What you will see is, I think this market is behaving itself even though the underlying spot market is not open. I think we've got a very valid case here to say that NDF and global exchanges work for much longer hours, and I think onshore exchange markets certainly have the ability to be open for longer hours, especially at a time when I think news coming across from anywhere in the world is impacting what is happening to our currencies, interest rates, stock markets, etc. I think longer trading hours have the potential to give people better ability to react to how they want to manage their positions. If you can go to the next slide, Maulik. Right. Additionally, what we just tracked was the distribution of our volumes during the day for each of the months from January, to just see that whether volume distribution has changed dramatically to only being concentrated in when the OTC market is open. We actually find that the distribution in March, April, and May follows a fairly similar pattern to what we had even in January or February. So effectively, 16% and 35% is the outside. The OTC market is the yellow bar. That's when about 50% average of our volumes happen, and the rest is distributed pre and post. Again, what I'm trying to say is that the exchange has been fairly consistent in being able to provide liquidity across the entire working time. We've also interestingly seen that other currency pairs like the sterling INR and the euro INR, the sterling INR now contributes to almost 10% of our total volumes in futures. This was barely in the early single digits, even a few, I think last year, if I had to look at it. So I think what we have to, perhaps this has been a time when there's proof that the exchange has played a very complementary role to banks in being able to provide much needed depth and liquidity to the foreign exchange market. Again, here, if we see the number of clients trading on the platform in March and April, and I'm talking about end clients and users, we've seen a number of clients traded having increased by almost 38%, which is, we've had discussions and calls even from some of the smaller SME and corporate clients to say that while it has been difficult to access my banking channel, at least on the exchange, I've been able to get liquidity that I needed. Another interesting thing I'd like to highlight in this chart is if you see the bank's portion of the overall, the last slide, Maulik, the bank section of the total volumes has actually increased in the last few months, which means that banks are also being able to leverage better, being able to manage their liquidity requirements through the exchange platform. Again, talking about how coexisting and complementing markets, I think, have worked to the benefit of all. That's really all I had to say. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I think what you have said is very, very important and critical. We are looking at the financial sector development. The forex market, both OTC and exchange, continues to coexist. And what we are hearing, both from you and Sapna, that here is a case where they are complementing each other. So here is a crisis. Banks are not able to provide, maybe it's a limited time during which they are on. And here is an exchange that really comes up and supports the corporates. And at the same time, there has been a development happening at both exchange and OTC by way of various amendments, various circulars. We are talking about April 2020 circular, we'll see June 2020 as maybe a new world for the entire OTC market. Now, in the middle of all this, Hussain, and you have been part of this entire thing, I really want to have your still a key things which are not delivered yet in terms of what could be the wish list. I know there are lots of miles to achieve and so little time. Yes.
One, am I allowed to say only one? So actually, if I had to put it at only one, I would say spot markets on exchange platform.
That has always been a favorite course
and yeah, I think perhaps extended market hours. I'll extend it to two. Give me the liberty. So those are the two, and then the other smaller ones on documentation and operationalization can move along as they do.
At the same time,
so these are fundamental.
Yeah, what I really want to put on record is that what we are seeing here, especially on the OTC front and June 2020 circular. It's going to be a lot more different experience both for corporates, for the banks. I'm sure it's going to be a reverse pressure from the banks onto the corporates and vice versa, from the corporates to the bank for their own development. Because here is an opportunity where the local banks, has an access to the NDF market. So naturally, they will build their competencies, their skills, their resources. And at the same time, corporates have an access to the bank which is as strong as any other overseas banks, and that really goes into a huge sectoral development, and it's a pull and push that we see, so which is a great thing that could have happened. And on that note, I want to go back to Tyaguji. Tyaguji, in the first part you talked about the market that we are in. You talked about maybe U-shaped recovery. That's what the poll says. And you also talked about various conditions that needs to be fulfilled before we really see market reviving. Every single person on the webinar today want to hear your views on the currency market, both dollar rupee in particular and even the crosses, the majors. Take us through that, sir?
See, basically, am I audible?
Yes, very clear.
Yeah. See, we have gone through so many crises actually. So basically, from 1990s, if you take in the last 30 years, we were, let us say, from LATAM crisis to Tequila crisis to Asian crisis to LTCM crisis to dot-com bubble to GFC to Eurozone crisis and now coronavirus. So we have gone through all these crises. And then every crisis, what it teaches some lessons actually to the markets actually. In all these crises, if you see the broad, as the crisis intensifies, naturally there is a flight to safety and flight to liquidity that normally happens actually. So the first casualty is EM actually. So as there is as our base case reminds that the economic contraction is going to continue for some more time, possibly into 2020, and the kind of contraction that we have seen is only a tip of the iceberg, and possibly we are getting much lower as far as the economic cycles are concerned. Naturally, dollar EM has to go up. That's a basic point. Number one. And then people are writing off the dollar. See, it is simple analogy actually. Basically, let us say the country in good health and country in a bad health, and both the countries are getting into a crisis. So, the two health crisis. If a health crisis hits both the countries simultaneously, the country which entered the crisis in good health, naturally it recovers much better than the country which went to the crisis with ill health. So if you take, let us say, for instance, China, Japan, Europe, and even the EM, they entered this crisis on a much weaker footing, whereas US entered this crisis on a much stronger footing. So naturally, it is up US who is going to come out of the crisis with more strength. So basically, even despite all this easy monetary policy and loose fiscal policy, you are not going to see dollar weakening at all. Actually, you tell me in the last 10, 15 years, when the dollar has weakened? Absolutely no.
So Tyaguji, as on this subject, I want to pick up a question from the participants and very interesting observations. I'm going to have you respond to that. Ankit Madhwani has put a question. So, and I'm putting this in between because it's very relevant. I'm reading it out that to you. There's a lot of global chatter about currency reset, given the unprecedented central bank balance sheet expansion in the short run. Resets have already happened earlier in 1944, 1971, 1987, Euro, etc. IMF, SDR, a possibility. Gold-backed SDR, question mark. Yuan also included in SDR since 2016. What is your view on this and what are the chances it will be done? How is India placed if such a thing were to happen?
Absolutely, there is not. I don't think in our lifetime we will ever see dollar getting replaced by SDRs and all that stuff actually. At no point in time, actually, dollar is going to be a king actually. Basically, the kind of liquidity and the kind of safety that it shows to the entire world, naturally, it is going to be the currency of the world as far as basically reserve currency and transaction currency. So both these characteristics are going to stick with dollar, and it will take a long time for somebody to dethrone. Can you believe sterling used to be the currency of the world for nearly 200 years, and then it took actually possibly only in the last let us say 70 years back it was dethroned. So
so Tyaguji, the question is whether it will happen or when will it happen?
No, I don't think it's going to happen actually. Basically, I think it will be a theoretical talk, and every time actually basically people will be writing off the dollar, and at the end of it actually this is dollar, despite all the handicaps, actually it continues. You just see the entire crisis. The first thing, March, actually there was a sell-off in dollar. Afterwards it never got sold out. 98, 80 to 102, actually it has been holding this range and possibly break up the range on the higher side and going higher actually. So at the end of it, see, one big point actually, even in your last conference I was talking about it, the the majority of the debt is denominated in dollars, and you have to repay in dollars actually. If you are going to repay in dollars, and then if you don't have any export revenues to generate dollars, then naturally you are going to either borrow dollars or buy dollars to repay the debt. So, in this context, actually, the dollar is going to stay strong, as simple as just dollar AM.
So your point is this will remain for a long time. It's maybe a debate is not about whether it will continue or not. It will continue because maybe, and one of the things that I also want to place on record is maybe there is no credible alternate where the world can rely on. And as you rightly said, be it a transaction currency, be it a borrowed currency, it's dollar everywhere. So the question is not whether when it will happen. According to you, it will never happen.
It may not happen. It will not happen. It will not happen, actually. It's a theoretical argument that is being put forth by everybody. And then everybody writes a obituary of dollar
So
on
dollar
every given occasion.
So where do you see dollar rupee now?
Dollar rupee, just actually, we'll supplement that argument. You put that slide, actually, the bear market. There are three cyclical phases.
I will. Give me a moment.
Yeah, of course.
Yes.
This is where we are coming from, actually. See, basically, any stock market watcher, or for that matter, any risk market watcher, let us put it like this. If it is going to be a structural bear market, then you are going to see normally 60% sell-off. If it is a cyclical bear market, it is normally a 30% sell-off. See, basically, I have taken only whatever the sell-off that have happened post World War II. Let us say 12 bear markets you can take, and then you can classify it. Structural bear market, when there is actually basically a big deleveraging phase happens. Cyclical, naturally some inflation, interest rate, all those old conventional factors which play into account. And then you have got event-driven markets, a war, a oil shock, or let us say coronavirus shock can also be a event-driven market. If it is an event-driven market, you have got 30% sell-off. This is going to be the broadly what equity markets have been doing over the last possibly 100 years, we can say. So, the event-driven market, the coronavirus, which is being thought of as an event-driven market right now, if it becomes a structural market, then you are looking at a 60% sell-off in equity markets. So right now it all went down by 30% and then it has all regained by 30%. So it is not to say that the 60% thing cannot happen. The only thing is right now the market is taking this to be a event-driven phenomena. So as far as equity markets are concerned, there is a very quite a possibility that March 23 low will be seen very soon, especially in the developed markets. So naturally, as a corollary, you are going to see much deeper sell-off as far as Indian equity markets are concerned. I can go on record saying that. Of course, all my views are personal views. It is nothing to do with my employer, actually.
Got it. You want to talk about the next part, the consumer behavior?
The one thing about the rupee, actually. Rupee, we had that 76, 75 in mind, actually. Of course, it had hit. Right now, possibly, I think you are going to see the floor at 75 holding very strong. And then possibly, see, every take from 2000 to 2020, what has happened? There are three major sell-off in rupee and two minor sell-off in rupee. Major sell-off, it has depreciated by 30%, and minor sell-off, it has depreciated by 20%. If you think it is going to be a minor sell-off, then you are, even if you take 68.30 as a base, then actually you are going to see 85 very soon, actually.
Okay.
So really, the stress is very much there. That's a basic point, actually. Nothing more than that.
Got it. I want to pick your thoughts on the next piece that we talked about on the consumer mindset. And, how do you see that impacting we all coming out of the crisis? You want to talk about that? I have a minute and then I want to go to Sapna and then there are a few questions that I can see. I'll take that as well. Yeah, they're good.
Yeah, basically, it's very self-explanatory. The only thing is actually we are sitting in the house for the last 2 months. Actually, of course, we all are sitting. First, we denied, and then we got angry, and then we had a bargain, and then the sadness came in. Now we have accepted. Actually, even if the lockdown gets extended up to 30th June, also you accept the reality, and then you stay at home. Actually, this is what the consumer is going to do. Actually. First, he denies, and then eventually he accepts the reality. Actually, there is no other choice. Actually, as simple as that. So, when the consumer returns, don't expect vengeful spending that is going to actually, but that is going to be the hallmark of a V recovery. It is going to be very measured response from the consumer that is going to happen actually, especially in a world. Can you believe every third guy will be unemployed if the
Tyaguji, we have.
very measured.
You will have to repeat the last piece. We missed. We lost you completely.
Is that
Yes, it is better now. Please go ahead. You said every third person will be unemployed.
did you hear?
Yes, please go ahead. Okay, Tyaguji, can you say something so that we know whether you are audible, not audible? Okay, so as he's managing his instruments, let me move on to Sapna. Sapna, I want last few comments from you, especially as Tyaguji said that it's going to be a long drawn recovery ahead, and we are going to have a consumer behavior which will be very different. You will have more of savings now, less of spending, extra cautious behavior. What do you expect from the government if we really have to go through this entire journey ahead? What are your wish lists? And we know that there are a lot of announcements happening by finance ministers yesterday, today, and tomorrow as well. If you have your thoughts and wish list, what would that be? And I'll then pick up few questions from the list as you answer.
So the main the main pain point right now has been the hedges that have been booked for our exports, and even up to last month, even up to March, these were we are in the garments business. Garments have already been manufactured. Some of them have been shipped. Some of them are waiting to be shipped, and then we've gone into lockdown. So now we've come 2 months hence. We've seen orders being cancelled. We've seen being postponed. But what happens is with the hedges, when they've been booked at say 73 or 74, and we are now today at 75 or 76, there is a cash flow impact. So I have no choice but to cancel it or postpone. Even if I extend the contracts, I'm actually taking the cash flow loss. So one thing that we've also put up already to the regulator is that whether these contracts could be extended on a historical basis. So if I have the contract at 73 and we are at 76 today, and I want to postpone it by say 6 months, and I get a rupee premium, let it be done at historical rate, which is 73 plus $1. So we're short at 74.
Which
And-
used to be the case earlier, right?
Sorry.
Which used to be the case earlier. I think there was
Which used to be
better.
the case earlier, yeah. And if it could be, or the loss that one has to take if it is on a mark-to-market basis, as in at the current rates, whether the loss could be funded by way of a loan, from the banks. That I think is already happening, but it is different. We're being handled different by different banks, so it just depends on the discretion of the bank. That's one thing. Secondly, if the subvention, the export credit subvention has come last night, so that's it was expected big relief. The working capital moratorium that is there, which ends on the 31st of May, we expect that to be extended because we've gone on for the extension much longer than we started out with. And the other thing which have been announced, like the TLTRO, or the easing of working capital finance by reducing margins, it is really, these got announced somewhere in April. We still haven't been able to get financing out of that because generally banks, everyone's the execution or the implementation of that is a big, leaves a lot of room for if you leave it to the discretion, it won't happen. I think a more mandatory thing has to come out from there. From that.
So let me pick up a question from the audience and see. It has two relevance. One is the question is by Mr. Venkatachalam: has RBI managed this crisis well? And it can have both the perspective, the banking side, the liquidity side, and the forex side. Sapna, let me hear from you on the banking side, on the liquidity front. Tyaguji from the forex front. Yes, Sapna.
So have they handled it well on the banking side? I suppose if you look at it from a banker's point of view, curtailing the markets from 10 to 2 probably was required, because it's the liquidity for the banks also was a big. I mean, getting pricing was a big issue. So and anyway, corporates were not getting the benefit. So they've they've reduced that. So yes, that has been handled well. But as far as a lot of the other stuff that they've done, where they've made announcements, it's fine. There is a lot left to the discretion of the bank. I think, come on, if you were also sitting in the bank having to make the decision, no one's really wanting to take that risk today. There is so much of a fear. So I think certain stuff should be made mandatory, or specifics. You shouldn't be just leaving it to the discretion, because everyone's here trying to figure out what to do, and no one wants to take it on their head. Yeah.
And that's really the point. On 27 March, RBI came up with the regulatory package that talked about various measures, but in the end, when it comes to working capital, they left it to the bank. They may decide.
Absolutely.
That's really the
absolutely. So even sort of easing, working capital financing, reducing margins. Okay, we've been negotiating for the last 1 month. Nothing's happened. So that the point is that if you had to do something like make it a 25% cut, there's no whatever you are with, you reduce it by that much. So it's no one has to, because of course the bank is worried that tomorrow some questions will be asked. Why did you do it for this customer? Why did you not do it for that? So
true. Let me hear from Tyaguji on the forex side. Did RBI manage it well?
Who are we to judge them? Yeah, I doubt.
So okay, I will put it this way: from 71 to 76 in the current crisis,
see, basically, I don't know. Actually, basically, absolute level of exchange rate. See, basically, at the end of it, the absolute level of exchange rate doesn't matter for RBI, doesn't matter for the banks. The bank is looking for the next 10 paisa, 15 paisa, whereas the absolute level matters only for the corporates, actually. Basically, my bottom line and top line gets impacted whether if it is 71 or 76, actually. Basically, you have to ask me whether the 71 is better or 76 is better to each of the corporate, rather than asking RBI, actually. So I think every emerging market central bank did it, and they also did it. There is actually absolutely, you just cannot find any fault with them. But more than that, the war is underway. Now you cannot declare victors, actually. That's a basic thing, actually.
Very well said. She is desperate to say something. Sapna is just raising. Yes, Sapna. What do you want to...
I was going to say one man's food is another man's poison. So where the importer is probably saying that, it was done very badly and they should have had it in a controlled manner, and exporter is probably saying, oh great, finally it's happening. So again, going by what Tiago has said, that it's all relative, right? The level. I mean, at 76, some will be happy, some will not be.
What would you advise? Importer to be hedged, exporter to be hedged at this level? That's another question from the participants.
Depends on your time frame. What is your time frame? So there is no one blanket answer which fits all. It just depends on your time frame. I think today most of us are on the buy side, in the sense that importers haven't covered and exporters have covered and orders have been cancelled or thing. I don't think anyone's sitting pretty feeling happy, except for probably importers who've had to necessarily cover. I would buy every dip. Okay. And it just depends. It depends on what your time frame is. So, there is this tendency to, 1 year dollar, should I be buying because I'm going to pay so much premium? So again, depends. There is no one
Naturally means
size.
you will not sell if you are an exporter. Does that naturally mean?
I will not sell. Not right now.
Okay,
Not
Tyagi,
right.
would that agree with this strategy as an exporter not to hedge right now, an importer to hedge?
Where is the business here? There is absolutely no business.
That is the underlying. Yeah, very true.
No business. There is no underlying. See, basically, the only thing is it is only 15% of the entire business that is getting done. And honestly speaking, I don't see it till basically at the end of it, those guys who have booked export contracts and then those who are selling out cancellation cash flows, I don't think how they will get confidence to book export contract. I'm not sure. Yeah, number one. Number two, even imports. Yeah, absolutely. Basically, the economy has grown to a standstill, and then you see the services PMI, which says the entire story. Now, after the lockdown eases, and then once the economy restarts, then all this your exchange rate view and all that stuff matters. Right now, we are only it's only a transitory zone. Actually. I think my feeling actually, as of now, I don't think neither there is any physical export activity that is happening, nor there is any import activity that is happening, and neither the exporter nor the exporter are sensitive to the exchange rate right now.
Very well said, Tyaguji.
Interesting.
And this is the last question I want to take this up with Huzan. Very important, and that's straight away related to the financial market development. And the question says like this: do you think from June USD INR market will be dominated or determined from Mumbai and not London?
I think you can probably ask Tyagu sir that question. But, I think there has been various perceptions, beliefs, studies done that our dollar rupee rate gets determined in Singapore in the morning before it opens. And I know for a fact that when I used to trade it at the bank, people would call in those days to find out, "Arey bhai, NDF mein kya ho raha hai, batao." So I think today information is far more easily available. Perhaps not to the entire audience, but to a large part of it. I think fundamentally the market still continues to be India. I mean, frankly, where the real trade flows are happening and where the real economy is where, yes, the sharp movements that happen do definitely get first sometimes seen in offshore markets because simply of the time that they have to trade versus we have, which is why I mentioned one of my asks being that we should also be open longer hours, at least from an exchange point of view, to be able to capture those moves here rather than see a gap up or a gap down risk either way. But yes, I think it's in the step in the right direction. Hopefully, with banks being part of the NDF market with more integration, will the arbitrage between these markets reduce? Will the NDF information really be available to everybody who's trading it? It finally is an OTC market. So it's going to be interesting come June 1. And yes, hopefully we will all be able to say yes, rupee is definitely discovered only in Mumbai.
Wow.
Not to mention, of course, one second, I forgot to mention one last point. We've just launched dollar rupee even at IFSC. It's a very small start. There's a lot to be done there too. But that could also perhaps going forward provide a platform to see where offshore market is trading. Thanks.
Fantastic. And on that great hope and the market development to look forward to, I end today's webinar. I really want to thank each and every participants, members who have been through this last 1 hour. All the panel speakers, thank you so much. You have put a lot of your efforts to prepare for this webinar. Thank you so much for your insights, for your whole perspective. And we look forward to you for the leadership as the leaders in this financial market. At Almus, we will continue to come out with more and more webinar series. And thank you, NSE, for partnering in these initiatives. and all the member of NSE who have supported us, Saurabh, Vivek, thank you so much for making this entire webinar happen. Thank you for all the help at Alma's team, those of you who have been on the back end. Special thanks to Shriram, who's there right now in the back end, listening to all this conversation for guiding us, and Vijay, who's been really supporting us on the entire social media effort. Thank you so much, and we'll look forward to more and more webinar series. We'll bring in more experts, more leaders. Thank you so much. Have a great day. Take care of yourself, your family, every one of you. Thank you so much. Good
Thanks,
day.
Malik. Yeah, bye.
Thank you. Thanks, Malik.